Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. Here's a question. What do you do when you come up against a problem that confounds you? Well, one option is to ignore it and carry on as if it doesn't happen or isn't going to affect you. Or, here's a novel thought, we change our approach. What I have here is the hub assembly with the screws angled at their required angle, and they look all... Oh, hang on, what's going on there? Oh, the darn thing is actually interfering with the hole that I would have drilled. Darn it. So I've got a choice of whether to drill all the holes, which is my preference, at the same height in the steel hub and alter the ones that go into the hub, into the struts themselves. Well, that's all well and fine, but can I even get there when the damn things actually can't even be inserted properly? So I thought, well, if I cut my pipes in half that I'm using as the interface to get the angle, does that help? And the answer is yes, it makes a huge difference. And that's this little interface here and here, as we can see. That makes a huge difference. But still is a bit of a problem because of their width. I go, oh, what else do I do? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I've got an answer. Don't carry on beating your head up against a brick wall expecting a different outcome. And that's exactly what I was doing in this example here. Sometimes we follow a path of endeavour or logic that you should never have followed. And it's quite often when I say when we join the dots, some of those dots should never have been joined. And that's what happened here. I made the assumption correctly that it would be nice to have an interface washer or plate or block that would be angled to suit the inside surface of the hub. Still think that's a good idea. However, if I get rid of this one, this model, and go to this model, what has changed? Well, this is the exploratory, and I have got rid of the interface blocks. Well, one of them, and I've just got this pipe that has been radiused to suit the inner circumference or the angle of the hub, and the screw can pop through that hole, go through, not in this case because I haven't got it in the right place, go through this hole and angle up and down and meet all the requirements I need. And guess what? I have no interference problems with those particular parts in the assembly. In fact, that sound is the very item that I have made up in the workshop, this here, where I took a bit of 25mm pipe. It's got around about a 1.8mm thickness in the wall. It's quite thin, and I drilled a hole through it, 10mm, and this screw can lift up and down by 45 degrees, meaning that hole, which is required at 10mm to get the thread of the SPAX style screw through, allows that much articulation that it will accommodate all of my strut hub connections for this assembly, the top assembly. Eliminating one entire component has got to be more elegant. Now, the one thing that I have done, and I'm still rattling it around in my hand as I speak, is that I can either go with the washer or a 12mm nut, because it turns out that a 12mm nut accommodates all the issues that I need to eliminate or accommodate in here, and that may well be that this will still work. Or, confusing my the explanation, I know, just go with a flamin' washer, because again, I don't want to load the head of the vital component, the screw. I don't want to load it up to where it may reach a failure point. It's never going to happen. But the washer that's underneath it helps to mitigate that pressure that may be only imaginary in my mind, but that also accommodates the, if I'll just get rid of this, I'll oops, can't do that. If I explode that, if I get rid of this, get rid of that, the spec screw has this flare to the top of the shaft itself. So the washer accommodates that extra thickening there, and therefore the load is transferred, whatever load that would be, through the entire shaft to the head, because you've got the washer engaged. So I thought to myself, wow, is eliminating a component a positive thing? More noise on the desk. But is that a good thing? Well, of course it is. Anything where you can reduce the complexity and increase its simplicity and performance has got to be a good thing. And this is what this does. Now, how, I'm banging around a bit, how do we create that curve to match up? In fact, the question is, do you need to worry about it, David? And the answer is, not really, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to do so? So, more noise. I've taken a 8mm bolt, nut on, and gee whiz, David, I make life hard for myself. An 8mm bolt, put a nut on this side, a nut on that side, and insert the bolt through the centre here, of course, and then I can swing this thing backwards and forwards on my large disc sander, which I've done. And boy, you can't believe how hot that metal gets, and how quick. But I can arc the half bit of pipe, and it creates very, very easily this curve on the half pipe section. Having done it and realizing it was so easy, I thought, well, why not do it? The only thing I would change is I'd make sure this is a thicker wall pipe, maybe a water pipe, and it's probably got a wall thickness of 3mm or bigger. Why? Because later on that same piece of pipe will be cut to 30mm like this one is, or 45, that will go through the strut itself for the lower assembly, which then means that with a thicker wall thickness I can put a thread on this to take my 10 or 12mm threaded rod. Anything that you can do in a project where you can standardize things, use a single item that can be used in multiple situations, is probably wise. And in fact, if I wanted to make the lower assembly with only this sort of length of pipe section, that wouldn't be hard. I could cut a whole series of pipe at 30mm long, pop it into this scenario or the lower assembly, which I'll show in another video, and it serves a dual purpose. That's more efficient, elegant, it's just more just cheaper, and has very little downsides, I'd suggest. So what I'm saying, I suppose, after all this, is a step forward. Yay! Because I was really being put to the test with this, and I thought, bugger it. All my efforts, I just kept on adding layer upon layer upon layer of complexity, and it wound up with, damn, it doesn't work. In fact, I still don't know whether I'll use the screws. In fact, I'm going to suggest this. I may well use the screws in some positions and not others, where I'd go back to the tabbed facility. And if it turns out at the end of the day that it is better to use the tabs alone, then I can just throw this idea of the screws out and say, good idea, would work, but it doesn't need to be an option, and I've eliminated something. But until you've gone to that extent, you won't know, and therefore, it was just like, good idea, and had to throw the darn thing out. At this stage, it's still an option. I'm going to have to make a full-size model to then allow me to jump up and down on a few times, allowing my 100 kilo weight to test it. Ultimately, I'll need to engage an engineer, because if that is a big if, I were to make these to pass on, and I were to take a pecuniary compensation for it, I make money from it, I have to make sure that my butt isn't going to be bitten, and an engineer would be able to tell me that with more authority. But as a home builder, you don't have to worry about this, and I'm thinking the information that you are gaining from this could well be quite it'd be invaluable. Sorry, I do not accept even if it works, the idea of just using ordinary wood screws that you use in ordinary wood projects as an option in this area. These are serious screws, and they are a commercial or industrial type screw. I've banged on about it before. I know and accept that I'm paranoid, but I can't change that. In fact, these models are representative of a 140 millimeter long Spax screw. Where I live in New Zealand, they come up to 450 millimeters long. Yeah, okay, that's a little bit overkill, but it's not like a drywall screw as I see some people using, and that's the point. There will be situations where even this screw might fail. It's a serious screw. The 450, okay, that's a little bit overkill, but that's where the tab type approach, this one here, comes into play. This has a lot more potential to resist any load I could give this hub and strut. All I need to do is to change the length of this. The multiple insertion points of the screws means that they're in shear, not in tension, in the end of an ingrained piece of timber. Make my point? Hope so. And with that, my computer is starting to whir like crazy, and you're probably picking that up in your speakers, your headphones. Apologise for that, but I think this is a real step forward for our approach. Simple, relatively easy. The hardest thing about this whole thing is actually cutting the damn things in half. You can't hold on to them. They want to, if you put them in a vise when you're cutting it, they'll of course collapse onto the grinding disc. So the easiest thing would be to cut a hole in a piece of timber, insert the pipe into it, cut the length of the bit of pipe that we're talking about in half, and then drill the hole through it. That sounds like it's worth a video. Okay. Oh, by the way, I burnt my fingers several times doing the first one of these. Not comfortable. So you've got to come up with a way of holding the metal of the pipe as you're cutting it. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay. Bye now.